Hello Cabinet Makers, this is a re-record of the first session that I gave at SketchUp 3D Basecamp 2022 in Vancouver, and we'll be looking at SketchUp for cabinet makers from concept to construction, how you can use SketchUp to design, communicate your design and get your design build ready using dynamic components, parametric components you could say, and sending them to a cut list with labeled parts, accurate dimensions, cutting diagrams worked out for you using Cutlist Plus, and all this is running on the CabinetSense extension within SketchUp. So let's dive right in. I'll introduce myself first. My name's Alistair Johnson. I'm based in Sheffield in the UK. I design, make and fitted furniture or built-in furniture. The business that I founded is Freebird Interiors Limited, and this is a fairly typical project of ours. We do mostly domestic fitted furniture, a lot of shaker doors, bespoke bookcases, everything bespoke sized, spray painted in water-based spray paint, and mostly panel material based. I trained previously in architecture and came to this line of work in my late 20s. I started sharing the process of learning and teaching what I learned from quite early on, and the YouTube channel grew as a result of that. It's a mixture of technical information about hinges and construction methods, and also the journey of the highs and lows of building a woodworking business starting in my garage. We now have a 2,500 square foot workshop. The YouTube content led on to a membership content by request from YouTube subscribers who wanted to give back because they'd benefited from the content created. That grew quite naturally and organically into a membership site. So you can connect with me in those places, and also on Instagram. Just search for Freebird Interiors or Alistair Johnson and you'll find me there. So this is a shot of myself and Brady, one of my early apprentices who is now my production manager. This photo is at our garage workshop when it was based at the back of my house. And as you can see there on the right, we started working quite early on to systemize the way that we make standard work. We do a lot of fitted alcove cabinets. Generally we found that customers want one of 2 or 3 styles. So rather than reinventing the wheel every time we design a project, I started to establish set ways that we manufacture our doors and our floating shelves, typical scribe widths and other sizing decisions that allowed us to break down a typical cabinet into a series of formulas. We've used SketchUp very early on. Since I trained in architecture, I identified SketchUp as a tool that I could take with me on the laptop to a customer's house and draw their space and their furniture in front of them, helping me to win the work because they could really see what they were going to get. This is our current workshop, so this is a 2,500 square foot workshop. We now have a CNC machine, panel saw, edge bander. We still use a lot of our old manual methods for putting bookcases and cabinets together. You can see Brady using the Freebird 3D assembly square there. We don't have a lot of solid woodworking machinery. We have a router table, things like that, but we are primarily working with panels, MDF, birch plywood, some solid oak, and we do go now from SketchUp to the CNC machine, and that will be the subject of a second talk. For this talk we'll be looking at this project of ours, going into SketchUp, how this was made, and I can show you, focusing on that bottom left cabinet, how that goes through to cutting lists in a fairly automated way. Do check the timestamps below this video if you want to jump to a particular topic. The agenda for this presentation is as follows. We'll look at why SketchUp. Many woodworkers begin with SketchUp. As you grow your business, take on staff and need to produce at a higher capacity, you may ask yourself whether SketchUp is the best piece of software to continue with. There are proprietary softwares that are made for the cabinet industry. I'd like to explain why I think SketchUp is a good piece of software to grow with you, although every software has its strengths and weaknesses. We'll then be looking at the challenge of moving more rapidly from concept drawing to construction drawing. This is the challenge that I've set myself. How can I draw at that very early stage with the customer in such a way that a lot of the construction information is decided as early as possible? I will then demonstrate my system with live modeling on this video. We'll have a look then at different approaches in terms of the balance of design versus construction time. And we're going off a template where there was a Q&A at the end when I gave this live, but do ask me questions in the comments below. So why SketchUp? What I mean when I ask that really is, why not these or any number of other bits of software that are designed for the cabinet industry? Well, as I said, there are strengths and weaknesses to all of these, and I've dabbled with all of these, and I've spoken to advanced users of these software. They have frustrations, they have things that work really well. All of them are only as good as how well you set them up, and they all require a lot of setup and a lot of understanding. So do budget for training, whichever option you go for. The reason that we have stuck with SketchUp, I've broken it down to 3 key strengths in my mind. Firstly, concept. When you're working in SketchUp, you can very rapidly model. The way this model here was made was a push-pull process. So having laid out the room, I was able to just with 2 clicks drag a rectangle to fit in that base area of the alcove. Another click, move upwards, click again to make that have height. That's called push-pull in SketchUp. And then it was a very simple matter of drawing or copying lines across the face of that block, and then pushing the plinth in, pushing the recess there that's being pushed in right now, and very quickly then I can make an accurately scaled model of what I intend to build. So fast and loose 3D design is something that SketchUp is fairly uniquely well suited for, in my opinion. It's also excellent as a communication tool. You have a lot of flexible presentation options. You can create a drawing, add as much detail to it as you want, and create different scenes, which are different viewports or camera angles, where you can make dimensions show up only in one particular scene, but you're always working off the same model. So I find it very, very quick to present to the customer and other interested parties direct from the 3D model in SketchUp. It also has powerful options to output to architect style layout drawings using a related program called Layout. Now finally, construction. SketchUp is very powerful in generating the sort of drawings you need to determine the construction, putting accurate dimensions on. The different view options again here with a hidden line style. You don't have to show things in perspective, you can show elevations, sections, plan drawings. So these to me are the 3 key strengths of SketchUp, which work very flexibly in that drawing environment. And when you add to it the parametric cabinet capability that is brought by the CabinetSense extension that I'll be demonstrating, I feel that it competes very well with the other software that we showed. I would say communication is the key strength here. There's so much you can do and show in SketchUp, and communication often starts with the customer. How can we show the customer what we intend to make to win the sale? We communicate to ourselves when we start off on our own as designer, maker, installer. We need something which is going to allow us to get our thoughts down and check how things fit and decide how joints work, and then to read off that for manufacture. But as you grow in this sort of business, there are a lot of related parties who you'll need to communicate to. And again, SketchUp I feel is very strong for that. You can send it as a 3D model for rendering. We at Freebird give our workshop staff direct access to the SketchUp model at no extra cost. We can share it on the Trimble cloud service. They can just get onto the model online or download it to a desktop viewer, and all the other parties right through to our own CNC machine now we can control from the SketchUp model using the CabinetSense extension. So these are the three C's that sum up for me the strengths of SketchUp. Now the challenge I set myself from quite early on in this business was, how can I narrow that gap from concept drawing, which is quickly produced in front of the customer as a sales tool? How can I narrow that gap to production ready drawings? Might it even be possible to somehow bake into that initial drawing process a lot of the information that will then carry on through to production? This is possible when your work is fairly standardized. So these extra steps, could we be working with a model right at that early stage where the dimensions are accurate, the internal shelves are present, the materials are determined, and so on? And that is where we've got to with the help of the CabinetSense extension. So let's just swipe across and have a look at the SketchUp environment. I want to start with showing you a part built model of this project, or very similar to this project, and get straight to the good stuff of how this all works and how we can do it. And then I'm going to strip this away and show you the drawing process and how this is built up. So the first thing to demonstrate is I set my model up with scenes, which allow me at the top there to easily just click and change the visibility of parts. Now if you look at the scene settings here over to the right, this perspective scene, I've clicked on this drop down, and you can see that saved onto that scene are properties which include the camera location. But if we go either up here or over here to one of these other scenes, let's take external parts, that does not have camera location saved. So what that means is, if I choose to orbit, which I've done by just tapping O here and then clicking and dragging with the mouse, I can get a different viewpoint on the furniture and just click to other scenes which also don't have the camera position saved. And the camera won't move, it'll just show or hide certain geometry. But if I go back to my perspective scene, I've saved the camera position there. So that can be very helpful for how you can navigate the project and then quickly check things. Now note that a lot of these edges are black. This is where parts meet the wall. Now these are intelligent dynamic component parts where I've been able to tell them that a given edge needs to have a Scribe allowance applied. Our standard is that whenever a part meets a wall, floor or ceiling, we want to manufacture it 20 millimeters bigger than it needs to be, so our fitter will trim it back to fit the exact contour of the surface that it's meeting. So that black edge is a little indicator that that's been set up correctly. So you can see that by using the 3D model itself as a communication tool, I only need to give my workshop access to this, and they can answer a lot of the questions that previously I might have had to spell out via a printed drawing. They can just remove the room, spin around to a given detail, and determine the setback of a given part. Now these cabinets have been created using the CabinetSense extension, but I have added to them and made them go together my way. The doors are animated as part of what CabinetSense provides, and there are a lot of features, not all of which I can cover, but you can see here, for example, how this different style unit I've put over here. I'm going to just use the CabinetSense toolbar up here and use this render door profile. So these doors have been told to use what we call our classic profile. That's a profile that I've drawn in 2D and saved, and then CabinetSense has just wrapped it around the 5-piece door which I've created. I can turn that off and go back to a 5-piece door. And I have the option in CabinetSense of I can output all these 5 pieces. I can even tell that panel in there that I want it to have a certain overlap into a groove so that will come out on my cutting list oversize. Or I can render it as a solid door and machine this as one piece or two piece on my CNC machine, and that is how we do it. Now the materials for each part are set up. So if I go to, again, let's go to this cabinet, as part of the component options, where a lot of programming is embedded in this cabinet, I can go down to materials here and say, actually I want this to be made from this material. Apply. And everything that doesn't have its own instruction at a lower level, like within its own unique part, will follow the parent. So the outer cabinet we can call the parent. The subcomponents may have their own override. So this one, for example, was specifically specified to have a material. So you might want to do that where we want an oak top. We'll say, well, okay, we'll want this to always have an oak top. But let's go back to the outer component, and let's say actually everything that hasn't been otherwise specified, we want to have our standard painted finish, which I've used the millwork tag for. That's just how I've set it up with the standard CabinetSense names, and that takes on that painted finish. If I want to change the painted finish used for that tag, go to my project scene, which is where I see these hidden components which determine how CabinetSense works. So I've selected this palette component. I'm going again up to my component options, and here I can say anything that is millwork 1. I actually want to take on, let's say, this colour. I could have an alternate colour on each side if I wanted to, but let's just say that it will be Farrow and Ball blue ground both sides. Applied that. So now if I go back to my view, that's the colour we'll have. So let's just see how this now exports. Note that this cornice up here is not a CabinetSense component, but has just been wrapped around using Follow Me. So I can just fill that to match. When I use the Export button on the CabinetSense toolbar, it knows which components are CabinetSense ready, and it will ignore everything else that has just been drawn by a more normal process. So if I just hit export here, it will output each of those shelves, sides, bases, door parts in a way that I can open in Cutlist Plus. There are different settings there that I won't go into. And it is also going to give me a report about CNC machining, but that also will be covered in the second session. So having done the export process from CabinetSense within SketchUp, I can go over to Cutlist Plus, which is a separate program, PC only, I'm afraid. You can download that for free with certain limitations. There are different levels of paid program. If we go to Open, and this is where I export that data. This is my latest export. Now everything you see here has been exported, and the folders you see have been divided up by material, and they contain DXF files that they're not showing up because they're not read by this program, but they will contain individual DXF files of each part. Again, that's used for CNC and not covered fully here. So let's just go straight to our Cutlist Plus format export. Now you can get CabinetSense just to export a CSV file, but I do recommend using Cutlist Plus because it will all come in a ready to use format. So what we're seeing here is separate parts. Now the sub-assembly name is whatever name has been given to the cabinet. You can control that. The description there is the part name, back, deck, left end, so on, shelf adjustable. And then we see its thickness, its width and length, the type of material, all preset in CabinetSense, and the material name. Now, as long as you've got these married up to your material library here in Cutlist Plus, as long as they're set up correctly here, they will carry on over to layout drawings. So these are ready for panel saw cutting. Cutlist Plus is taking care of identifying the parts, finding the widths and lengths, and going ahead and laying them out within the sheet sizes that you've set up in your raw materials. So once it's set up at the CabinetSense end and the Cutlist end, it really is as simple as you just saw, bringing everything in, pre-labelled, go into your layouts, and you can go right ahead and print this, and it will print the list of parts above the cutting diagram, and you can go straight to the panel saw. What it's also showing here is these highlights on parts which have a scribing allowance applied. So that scribing allowance has been added on, so they are now 20mm oversized versus what they appeared to be in SketchUp, and this just gives you a little visual cue that those parts are expected to meet the wall and be cut to size on site. You can also do a limited bill of materials, which you can set up with pricing information, and you can also look at your hardware and your banding. So for example, 1mm edge band length, that's just on a few parts on the internal base cabinet there. And note that the Scribe within CabinetSense is actually set up as if it's a banding option, so that is showing here as well. But you can bring in your hinge clips, hinges, shelf pins even, all depending on how much you've set it up in that way. So that shows you the power of what's possible. Now let's just have a quick look at how a drawing like this is put together, to show you how easy it is, and to show you my particular workflow, which allows me to isolate things by scene. So I'll usually start by drawing my walls. I won't go through that. If you're a SketchUp user, you'll be familiar. You can just click. This is snapping to that axis, the green axis. I can type in a length before re-clicking. So I've just gone ahead and typed. You see it down the bottom right there. Hit enter, and then I can follow. See it snapping to that red axis. I know it's at 90 degrees. Again, type in, hit enter, and I can just carry on drawing in that way. So this is I mean, basically how that was done. Simple as that. Once I join the shape, I can pull it up to a given height. So that's how that was created. And what I'll do is I'll select that. So when I first drew that, it was just free geometry. You always want to be grouping and making components. So one way to do that is you can triple click and then everything's selected. Then I right clicked and went to make group. So that's how this became a group. And then I'll put that onto my walls tag, or walls layer as it used to be called. You can do that using this little layer dialog here. Whatever I select now will put it onto that layer. I have a lot of layers or tags. That's partly how CabinetSense works, but I've made it simpler by using tag groups over here. So the walls sit within a group of tags called room, which means I can just very quickly and easily turn off anything room related. And if you look at hide room scene here, you'll notice that room and other things go invisible, because that visibility setting has been saved to that scene. So going back to my drawing process, once I've got my walls in, I will add mouldings like skirting and cornice, and for that I'll use ProfileBuilder 3. This is another extension. It's a very powerful extension. I use just some of the more basic features of it really, but it's where I store my library of components, which I've set up at the home button here within its own browser. And these I've made available on another video, which you'll find on my YouTube channel. Look for a link below. I've put them in categories, so skirting. From experience in the UK, I found these are the main skirting types that I find at a house. So it's very convenient just to have it pre-drawn as a profile. Bring it in, hit this button down here, and straight away I can just start adding that to the bottom of my wall there. And anything that is a skirting has already been set up by me within ProfileBuilder to land on the skirting layer or tag, which means that it's there within a subgroup within the room. So again, if I hide the room, I can just hide that skirting in one click. What I'll also do is I'll drop the wall sockets on. So I would have measured everything up first when I go to see the customer, found my positions of sockets, and then within my walls group I'm just going to position that according to the measurement, sort of off the wall and up from the bottom, so that's exactly where it really is, and I can then reference that for a cutout or to remount it within my cabinet. Now you can see how isolating layers becomes useful, because when I want to then drop my cabinets in, which I'll usually do after drawing all the as-built conditions, the current conditions, it's quite nice to go and isolate just that skirting's visibility, so I can access the bottom of the wall, and it just works a little better for my workflow that way. So my next step is I've tapped T for tape measure, and if you click and then drag off an existing line, you'll get a parallel line. And I'm just giving myself my typical offsets for scribes. And then I've gone to M for move, and Control on the PC or Alt on the Mac is going to copy move over to my other scribe width here, and then I'm going to hit divide or slash by 3, and that's going to split that up into 3 because I want a division of 3 on this particular project. So now I'll start bringing in my geometry from my library. I'm using another extension here called Flex Tools Component Finder. This is free, and it just makes it that bit easier to navigate your component library and even create new folders, search your folders for your components. So I'd recommend getting this. So I'm going to go to my, no, that's not the one, my cabinet template. So what we have here are full parametric cabinets built from dynamic components. These originated as cabinets within the CabinetSense extension library, but I have doctored them to suit my own construction method, so I was able to choose the overlap of my side to my back. I was able to choose that for this type of cabinet I like to have a top that's 250mm deep, not full depth. I've chosen my door style. All that has been set up, and as you saw just there, I've scaled it to suit here. So I just tapped S and these scale handles appear, and you'll see in the process of scaling, so that was click, release, and then move, you see everything gets distorted. But once you've finished scaling, you see these styles here will pop back to the width that they've been told they need to be. So I can quickly drop in cabinets like that, resize them. Here's another cabinet I want. Here's a pre-made open base, and this one has settings within it that will snap. Let's just try that again. This already has alignment settings within it, so it will snap both to the floor like the other one did and to the side of any nearby unit. So again, I go to S, scale that to where I want it to be, and the thicknesses just have a little think and pop back to how they should be set. Now I can start putting on my external parts. Getting them lined up as they should. My plinth, this has been programmed so that it should just find a cabinet and pop below it and to a certain specified setback. And I was just scaling it to length again by hitting S and grabbing those scale handles. This left filler assembly, this also will find its place, but it just needs scaling to height and to width. So now let's put the countertop on. And you'll see that they're coming in with a material colour, which was the material set for millwork 1 in the previous drawing they were used in, but they automatically find the setting for that material within this drawing space with the palette component, and they will match to that. So we would carry on in that way, building the upper bookcase using a semi pre-drawn cabinet of that sort. and so on. That one's been set to snap to countertop height. So I'll be rescaling that and adding shelves. I'm not going to fully do that now because I think you get the idea. But let me just show you how shelves and internal components work. So this is a fixed shelf. I can drag that down to another position. Don't have to be too precise about it because it's just going to follow its rules which say how it should fit within the cabinet. I could put another one between these two fixed shelves here and right click on it and go down to my CabinetSense options, and then within that component options and fill, and I could say let's have 3 shelves evenly spaced within the opening there, and it will just take care of that. This divider I can copy move, so I've hit M for move, Control for copy move on the PC, that'll be Alt on the Mac, and I can just move that down like that. So as I was saying, you can copy move a divider like this, and it has rules set up in it, which mean that it will fill a gap between shelves because it knows that's its job. You can position it either by dragging or by specifying a distance you expect it to sit from the left, from the right, or a percentage. So you might choose to say I want it to sit exactly on the 3rd point. And there are a lot of other settings built in to this and all the other CabinetSense components to determine sizing, setbacks, material, edge banding even, which can all carry across to your cut listing and to CNC. Now there is an even faster way to put together models. If you've got standardized processes like we do, where we typically have a standard size Scribe, a certain way of doing a countertop with a certain overhang, I've been able to build an even more sophisticated cabinet with all those parts embedded within the parent component. I've made myself a little reference snapping point here. So I'm bringing that in. It is all build ready, parts are labelled, I just have to size it to the space in question, which is best done by typing it in on this cabinet because of overhangs which make scaling it not work quite so well. And similarly with the upper cabinet. Bring that in, again it's going to think for a bit and then pick up the material in the environment that it's landed in. Move it to where it should go. Scale it to the correct alcove width for this job. Oops. And as before, we can isolate it, hide the room. My team can inspect it. I can error check. See, for example, this part should have a scribing allowance added, but it doesn't, so I can just drill down into that. Go to my right side and say I want to apply a scribe there, and it shows up black, so I know that's going to come out sized 20mm beyond. And I can choose now to select only that cabinet if I want to export only that to cut listing or CNC. Go to my toolbar up here, CabinetSense toolbar, go to export, run, confirm that I'm happy that I've only selected those parts. It tells me there weren't any errors in the export, and now I can go back to Cutlist Plus and open just those parts. All those parts have come in. It's going to tell me if it finds a size and shape that don't fit the available raw materials. And what's happened here is I've left the doors as 5-piece. I can choose to make the doors like a solid panel for CNC machining, which is what we most often do, or I can choose to output each part as a 5-piece. So it's picked up a 12mm panel, and I haven't set up a 12mm thick raw material. I could set that up, and then when I do, that would all carry through to the layouts. So that is an overview of what can be done. We've really only scratched the surface. If you want to find out more, then do download a trial of CabinetSense. You can get some support from Paul at CabinetSense. Do check in the links below this video for any updates. It may be that I move to more formally training in this. You can always inquire about that, see if and when that's being properly launched. But for now, I hope that that was a good insight into the process. And just before we sign off, let me just show you this visual of what's going on here at a higher level. If you're a small independent maker working on your own, you may find that the most efficient process for you is to simply push, pull, model, rapidly model, get an agreed rough design, and then do a lot of the head work in the workshop. You can go to the workshop with a sketch like this, figure out your door gaps, figure out exactly how you want parts on your carcass to overlap. That is an enjoyable and legitimate way of working, but it's limited as your team start to grow, where you may need to instruct people in more detail about how you want things to be built. So another way of doing it is to go further at the design stage, draw the doors exactly to size with the gaps taken off, figure out the overlaps of those oak parts, get everything absolutely pinned down, so you're really just following a set of instructions when you manufacture. And that should, in theory, reduce the construction time. In reality, it can be that you spend a long time doing a detailed drawing and then your construction doesn't actually take that much less time, and the project may actually take longer. You may win work that way by having the more detailed drawing, and you may catch errors ahead of time, but it may only be a fairly small efficiency saving. It may be a necessary step to communicate with the team, but you may find yourself yearning for the time when you didn't have to explain yourself to anyone and you could just get making. So as you grow, I think really the aim should be to get systems in place. So below the waterline, before the start of an individual project, you need to put time in to get your systems running, so that then when that given project starts, your design process is quick and efficient, and your construction process also hopefully just flows through smoothly, and your project completion time is then significantly reduced. In reality, really, as we caught a glimpse of earlier, the systems work where all the brain power now is really going is a pretty big investment. It's taken us at Freebird a long time to get to what I've just shown you, and so you do need to be prepared to put a lot of that time in, which is another reason why, if it's just yourself, this may not be the route to go, but I would say it is an essential route to go down as your business grows and you have people and then ultimately perhaps a CNC machine to communicate with. Then having this kind of setup ready to go is going to make every project flow through much better. Do let me know what you think. I'll welcome all comments, and look out for the second instalment, where we'll be covering CNC in much more detail.